let me take a moment to introduce you to our speaker, Flory Wilson. Flory Wilson is the International Director for GIIRS at B Lab. She joined B Lab in April of 2010, working on the core team that has launched the global impact investing rating system, Ratings and Analytics. Flory chairs the Emerging Markets Standards Advisory Council that crafted the GIIRS rating methodology and led a beta test of the GIIRS assessment in early 2011 that involved over 200 companies and 25 leading impact investing funds in 30 different countries. Flory also focuses on business development, working with the emerging market-based mission-driven enterprises, investment vehicles, and impact investors who are using the GIIRS Ratings and Analytics and GIIRS's communications efforts. Previously, Flory was a senior international economist in the Office of Investment Policies at the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC, in Washington, D.C. At OPIC, she focused on measuring developmental, social, and environmental impacts of private sector-led investment across OPIC's $2 billion portfolio. She has extensive experience in the field, having conducted monitoring and evaluation visits of over 50 OPIC-supported projects in 26 different countries. Thank you, Flory. Over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this webinar and for your interest in GIIRS Ratings and Analytics. And before we begin, I also want to thank the Nexii team for organizing the webinar series and for the opportunity to speak to you all today. We're really thrilled to announce a partnership with Nexii, where GIIRS is one of their preferred ratings providers, and so we look forward to engaging further with the Nexii team and with a number of the entrepreneurs that Nexii and its AIRs are working with. So thanks for this opportunity, and I want to just start first by outlining the slides and the information that we'll review together over the next 45 minutes or so. First I'm going to start with a background on GIIRS Ratings and Analytics, and then dive into the methodology that we've developed to evaluate the positive social impact of both funds as well as companies. I'll talk a little about the ratings process and who else is using GIIRS, and then I'll wrap up by talking about some of the capital markets tools that we are developing and how companies and funds can use their GIIRS ratings to raise capital. And then we'll hopefully have 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. So please do use that question functionality that Justine mentioned, so that we can make sure to answer all of your questions as we go through these slides. Based on the feedback that many of you provided when you registered for the webinar, it seems like there's a lot of interest on, in particular, diving into the methodology that we use to provide the ratings. So I am going to try to spend the bulk of my time kind of on that section. And again, if you have more detailed questions about the methodology, please feel free to chime in. So with that as an introduction, first I just want to give you a little bit of a background information on GIIRS. GIIRS is one of 3 initiatives that is promoted by a nonprofit organization called B Lab. The B stands for benefit. And B Lab is based here in the United States. We've been around for about 6 years now. And really the broad mission of B Lab is to promote and raise awareness of social enterprises and sustainable businesses that are helping to create kind of the new economy. Putting it differently, it's promoting the power of private entrepreneurship in addressing and solving some of the social and environmental challenges that face our world today. The way B Lab addresses this issue is through 3 separate but interrelated initiatives, all of which focus on the social entrepreneur. The first initiative that B Lab was involved in is a certification called B Corp certification. certified B Corps have basically met the gold standard in terms of being a social or environmentally focused business. B Corp certification is different from existing certifications that look either narrowly at kind of a specific product or specific service or a production process, whereas the B Corp certification looks really across an entire business's activities, looking not only at their operational impacts, but also what their core business model is. And then for those companies that meet a certain threshold on the impact assessment, you know, those companies can then move forward in becoming certified B Corps. Today, we've got about 550 certified B Corps in the U.S. and Canada. And actually, with the launch of GIIRS last fall, we increasingly are seeing interest from entrepreneurs and socially focused companies in emerging and frontier markets in obtaining this certification. And so we are now beginning to certify B Corps in Latin America, in Africa, and then South Asia. I think we've got now about 10 kind of emerging and frontier market certified B Corps, and we'll be growing that community in the coming months as well. The second initiative that B Lab is involved in, I won't go into much detail on, but it's a public policy initiative focused mainly here in the United States in introducing a new corporate form, and that is called Benefit Corporation. That's actually a legal designation that's available now in 10 states in the U.S. And then the third initiative that B Lab focuses on is GIIRS, which is very much a capital markets tool, you know, a tool that is intended to support, you know, the allocation of more capital to social enterprises by impact investors. Thinking about kind of where GIIRS fits into the impact investing ecosystem, you know, to put this into kind of historic context and context for the future, impact investing, you know, number one, that term has actually only been in existence or in use for you know, the last 3 to 4 years. I'd say there are people who have been doing impact investing and calling it, you know, something like that is something that's been around for, you know, more like the last 10 to maybe 20 years. I think impact investing is an interesting iteration of the microfinance sector, which I'm sure many of you know, has more of a 30 to 40-year legacy now, and is very much now at a point where it is a mature marketplace. Impact investing, which is kind of the younger sibling to, in some ways, microfinance investing, is in an earlier stage in history. We're at a kind of a marketplace building crossroads right now. And what we need to ensure that there's more capital allocated towards these kinds of investments and greater transparency around what it means to be an impact investor or to be an impact investment is a number of kind of tools and resources available to the space, including ratings agencies such as GIIRS, such as SROI, other kind of clearinghouses, social stock exchange platforms like Nexii, and then other kind of product offerings to help provide greater liquidity to the marketplace and to ensure that there's adequate pipeline or deal flow for social enterprises. As these kind of tools are being built and put in place, we hope to begin to then capture the value of the marketplace. There are estimates that $500 billion to $1 trillion could be allocated towards impact investments. But in order to reach those targets, we really make sure that this industry's got the infrastructure and transparency around it to meet those objectives. And so then to talk a little bit more specifically about GIIRS and our own development, the GIIRS initiative was it kind of began to take shape in 2009 when we recognized kind of the need for a third-party rating product or methodology in this space, and so the B Lab team spent much of 2009 speaking with investors who were already involved in impact investing and investors that were kind of sitting on the sidelines that were interested in becoming impact investors or allocating a portion of their portfolio towards socially focused investments. And kind of finding out from them what information they would need in order to allocate more of their money towards impact investments. And the feedback that we got was, while there is a plethora of tools and resources available to do the financial evaluation necessary to make an impact investment, there really is a dearth of expertise when you think about impact measurement and focusing on the social and environmental performance of these companies or these investments. So kind of armed with that market information, we then spent 2010 developing the methodology for the GIIRS rating system and building out our technology platform. 2011, the first half of 2011 was spent testing out the ratings product. We worked with our kind of original 25 GIIRS Pioneer Fund managers and actually visited all 13 of those fund managers in their offices, and then actually sat down with about 150 of their portfolio companies and put those companies through the GIIRS assessment to get their feedback on the questions we were asking, the methodology, what was missing, what was there that shouldn't be there. And we got incredible feedback. It was quite valuable. We brought it back to our Standards Advisory Council, which is the body that really sets the standard and has crafted the methodology for GIIRS. And then with their approval, we launched GIIRS Ratings and Analytics last September at the Clinton Global Initiative. So with that as kind of the background on GIIRS, I want to focus now on the product and the methodology that we use to provide impact ratings. The analogy that we like to use is that GIIRS provides social and environmental performance ratings similar to an S&P or a Morningstar credit rating, but looking purely at positive impact performance. The value to the marketplace is that we provide a comparable and verified impact measurement. Comparable meaning that an investor can compare investments within and across portfolios, verified through our kind of rigorous data review and verification system, or process, which I'll talk about in a moment, and third party, and the fact that it's a third party methodology, meaning that rather than providing kind of anecdotal information about a company or a fund's social impact, that in order to get a GIIRS rating, these companies have gone through a pretty rigorous process. The three products that I'm going to talk about today cover our fund level impact ratings, our company impact ratings, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the GIIRS Analytics platform. We'll focus mainly, though, on the company impact ratings, which I think is most germane for this audience. But starting first at the fund level, GIIRS provides fund level ratings for private equity and venture capital funds. A fund rating is generated based off of an evaluation first of the fund manager through our fund manager assessment, which is comprised of roughly 40 questions that look at things like what kinds of companies, geographies, and sectors does the fund manager target for investment. And then what is the investment criteria that that fund manager reviews? Do they use a negative screen approach or a positive screen approach towards impact investing? What are they required to screen for through their agreements with LPs? And what kind of standard do they hold their portfolio companies to once they've made an investment? The third component of the fund manager assessment is portfolio, looks at how the fund manager manages the portfolio over time, meaning if they provide any technical assistance or capacity building to their portfolio companies, whether their own financial performance is tied to the social performance of the fund. And again, based on the responses that the fund manager provides through that assessment, that represents 10% of the total fund rating and really represents the intent of the fund manager. The other 90% of a fund rating is generated based off of an aggregation of its portfolio companies. So, again, an overall fund rating combines intent with actual performance over time. And so with that, I want to then talk about the portfolio company rating process as well. And so I'm going to move to the next slide. And actually, rather than talk through these slides, what I want to do is pull up the actual portal and kind of web interface that companies would use to go through the GIIRS rating process. What you should see on your screen right now is the GIIRS website homepage, www.giirs.org. For a company that is wanting to go through the GIIRS impact assessment, and I should just say at the outset, any company can come to our website, complete the assessment, and utilize a lot of the free tools that are available without paying anything and without actually getting GIIRS rated. So this is very much a public resource. But from the GIIRS website, companies will come over to this For Companies tab and then click on the assessment registration. On the assessment registration page, we capture 3 basic pieces of information. Well, first we capture some very basic contact info and then ask the company about, number 1, its country of principal operations, number 2, what sector or industry they operate in, and then number 3, how large the company is based on their full-time or full-time equivalent workers. Those 3 parameters determine what questions or what version of the impact assessment the company completes. So from a geography perspective, we've got an assessment that's appropriate for developed market companies, and we have a version that's appropriate for emerging and frontier market companies. From a sector perspective, we have 4 different broad sector classifications, including manufacturing, wholesale retail, service providers, and agribusinesses, including cooperatives, farms, and agro-processors. Within those 4 broad sector classifications, we have a number of what we call industry addenda. So we've got 4 different industry addenda that cover different financial service providers, including one that specifically targets microfinance institutions. And then we have a number of industry-specific metric sets that focus on such high-impact industries as healthcare, education, energy service providers, food service providers, or food product, rather, providers, that ask about certain metrics that we feel most heavily impact the kind of outcomes or desired outcomes of companies in those different sectors. And then this third characteristic, again, looks at number of full-time employees, and we have kind of 5 different company size classifications. One for very early stage companies that are technically have 0 employees beyond their kind of founders who are the working owners of the company. We then have a track for micro enterprises, one for small businesses, one for medium-sized businesses, and one for large businesses that have more than 250 employees. Once the company hits submit after filling in their information here, they receive an email almost instantly from GIIRS that has a link to the GIIRS company portal, as well as the unique username and password. And as soon as you log into the GIIRS company portal, you'll land on this homepage which has some kind of instruction on the rating process and how to navigate the portal. But from here, a company will move over to the Take Assessment tab. And this is where that tailored assessment has already been created and is waiting for the company to complete. I want to talk about a few different aspects of the company assessment and the methodology that's used. Depending upon those company specific parameters, there's anywhere from 90 to 140 questions and metrics that appear in the company's assessment. The assessment is comprehensive, and what I mean by that is it covers governance, workers, community, and environment from not only an operational impact perspective, but also a core business model perspective. And just to orient you here quickly, I want to just point out that what you can see is we're looking at the manufacturing version of the assessment for a company that has between 50 and 250 employees and that is headquartered in an emerging market country. The assessment has a number of, again, kind of operational questions that focus on these first 4 areas. A few things I want to point out. We have, next to most questions, kind of help text that provides additional explanation or definition to easily understand the question. And then next to each question, we also provide the option for users of the assessment to provide us with feedback. And that's really important. The GIIRS assessment is an iterative assessment, meaning on a 2-year cycle, we will release updated standards. Those standards are updated based directly on the feedback that users have provided to us as they've completed the assessment, and then also by feedback we've received from other stakeholders. The assessment itself is iterated upon through our Standards Advisory Council, which is a body of about a dozen folks who represent, everyone from kind of the entrepreneur to the investor to the consultant to the impact measurement expert to other thought leaders in the impact investing space. Another important aspect of the assessment is that it is positive impact focused. So this is not a compliance questionnaire. This is not a negative screen approach. We really are asking companies, above and beyond what you're kind of required to do, tell us what you do that really does have a positive mission on your various stakeholders. And then kind of just one other aspect of the assessment that I want to point out is that some of the feedback that we've gotten from current users is that completing the assessment provides a good opportunity to understand what the entrepreneur or what the enterprise does already that has positive impact, but it also helps folks recognize things that they might want to do to improve their impact performance over time. And so to that end, we have developed a number of best practice guides, I should say. Right now there are about 15 available, and in the next few weeks we're going to be rolling out another 15, so we're going to have close to 30 best practice guides that will cover about 95% of the practices and impact covered in the assessment. If you, as an entrepreneur, wanted to, for example, learn how you could strengthen your financial controls, you simply click on this link, and it's going to open up a best practice guide that will, number one, walk you through why it's important to have appropriate financial controls in place, and then things to consider or steps to work through in order to implement those financial controls across your business organization. Including one of the things I like about these different best practice guides is that quite often we have kind of a call-out box for earlier stage or small companies that say, here are kind of the first few things that you should think about as you are implementing improved financial controls. And then lastly, we provide a number of resources so that as you work through this process of implementing these controls, you can kind of identify other resources to help you in that process. And again, those are all kind of available to the public as a public resource. In terms of how a company is scored, how the score is determined, the assessment is out of 200 possible points. What you'll see here when you look at the assessment is next to each question there's a weighting. A number of these questions in this first section within governance are equally weighted. But we also have less weighted, more heavily weighted, and then also some unweighted kind of metrics or questions for research purposes. So we're transparent in the assessment regarding how heavily weighted or how important each question is. If you want to then understand, well, how do those weightings then roll up to that 200-point score, you can always navigate throughout from anywhere in the portal to the assessment weightings page or tab. And what I want to show you is here we were looking at an emerging market company with 50 to 250 employees, and we were looking at the manufacturing track. So to understand how that total score out of 200 points is generated, you can see here, okay, the governance questions were worth 10 points total, And those first few questions that we looked at in the accountability section are 7 out of those 10 points. And then it works down through, the total weightings across the entire assessment. The 200 points are allocated fairly evenly between operational questions and core business model questions. So, a true top-performing company is not only really a social enterprise at the heart of its business model, but also has taken a lot of steps to ensure that that their operational impacts also have a positive focus. In terms of the core business models, I want to just click on this tab to give you a sense of what kind of business models we recognize through the GIIRS assessment. This section operates on kind of a gating or contingency system, where this first question or first tab in the socially and environmentally focused business models ask, tell us more about what the positive intent of your company is. It might be to provide socially focused products or services. You might be targeting underserved communities. You might be providing an environmentally focused product or service. And then we've got a number of options that look at whether your company might be involved in an innovative wealth distribution model through a worker-owned business or a producer or farmer-owned cooperative. You might really focus intensively on your own supply chain by only sourcing through fair wage suppliers or fair trade certified suppliers, or working quite closely from a capacity building perspective with your supply chain. You may focus on your distribution models by having a micro-franchise or micro-distribution model where you're really creating a community of small business owners. Charitable giving is another model we look at, and then we also recognize, businesses that are intentionally hiring from chronically underemployed communities and providing or investing in those workers with, high levels of training. So there are about a dozen different core business models that we look at, and then depending upon which models the company associates with, there are then more detailed questions that get into more specific metrics and more specific impacts for each of those different business models. A few other points I want to make with regard to the methodology. As I mentioned, this is a positive impact focused methodology, and it's out of 200 points. What we intend to do is to provide, the analogy I like to use is that it's like a buffet of positive social and environmental impacts that we present to the entrepreneur. No one eats everything off of this buffet. So we have some companies that are covering a little bit of everything from governance to workers, community, and environment. We have other companies who go through this process and they say, I am an environmentally focused business. I provide an environmentally focused product or service. I don't focus on these other impact areas, and that's fine. Your score will reflect that through exceptional performance within the environment impact area. What that also means is that there is no expectation, in fact, no one has ever achieved the 200-point score. That would be for a company that has every social impact under the sun, as well as kind of an incredibly high standard from an operational impact perspective. And so what that means, and I'll show this to you in a moment when I pull up the company rating report, but what that means is, while it's out of 200 points, really a 5-star rated company or an exceptional company that's gone through this process earns over 120 points. So we've allocated star ratings based on a numeric scale based off of real data that we've collected through the companies and funds that have gone through the rating process. Before I pull up that company rating report, just one other thing I want to point out is we do have a disclosure questionnaire that is more of a negative screen approach to identifying mission-aligned investments that investors can use. This disclosure questionnaire is based off of the IFC's prohibited and sensitive sector lists, and then we've supplemented it with other screens that investors have identified to us as being things that they typically screen for that may be kind of sensitive sectors, they may be sensitive practices or activities that a company might be involved in. These do not preclude a company from getting rated. It is information that is included transparently, though, on the company's rating report. Lastly, once a company's finished the assessment, filled out their disclosure questionnaire, they can come over here to this Impact Score tab and get a preliminary sense of how they've performed on the assessment based off of the unreviewed data that they have provided. So this page will refresh and it'll show, preliminarily how the company performed at an overall numeric level within each of the impact areas and subcategories, and it also shows the percent of points available that the company earned at each of those different impact areas. So you can see, they filled out nothing in the governance section and they earned 0% of the points available. And then you can kind of see how that filters down through the rest of the impact areas and subcategories. Once the company hits submit for certification, at that time this data will come to the GIIRS team. And actually, I'm going to pull up here the process slide just to kind of lay this all out step by step. So it takes companies about an hour and a half to up to maybe 3.5 hours to complete that assessment and disclosure questionnaire. Companies can also select optional GIIRS metrics to report on that might help more fully tell the story of their impact performance. GIIRS, which is the Impact Reporting and Investment Standards, is much like the IFRS or the GAAP accounting standards, but for the social impact space. In other words, it's a taxonomy or it's a language that folks can use to articulate their social impact metrics, knowing then that the metric that they are reporting will have a common definition and standard relative to other contributors of GIIRS metrics. By getting GIIRS rated, companies and funds become GIIRS compliant in their reporting. So there are roughly 35 GIIRS metrics that are part of the core GIIRS assessment. So that first kind of step of filling out the assessment, again, takes an hour and a half to 3.5 hours. It very much is dependent upon the size of the business, the complexity of the business structure, and also the level of sophistication of the entrepreneur in terms of their familiarity with a number of the social and environmental practices and standards that we ask about in the assessment. Once that first step is completed and that Submit for Review button is selected, the data comes to the GIIRS team. We have a team of 5 full-time ratings associates who will review all of the data contributed. They have reviewed data from over 7,000 companies, so they're pretty adept at looking at data, identifying quickly where there might be gaps or inconsistencies in the information that's been provided. And after looking at the data, they'll set up a survey review or a phone call with the entrepreneur to go through the assessment and to double check and verify the data. That survey review takes about 60 to 90 minutes. And once the survey review is complete, a company can qualify for a preliminary GIIRS rating. The second step in our review and verification process includes a document review. Based on the responses that the company has selected in their assessment, anywhere from 6 to 15 documents would be requested for upload through that company portal that will help verify the responses provided in the assessment. Once the company has uploaded those documents, we have a partnership with Deloitte & Touche, our third-party verification service provider. Deloitte will review those documents and provide a report back to B Lab and GIIRS confirming the company's responses, and at that point we can issue a reviewed GIIRS rating to the company or to the fund. Lastly, on an annual basis, 10% of all rated companies are randomly selected for an on-site visit. So those are kind of the 3 steps in our review and verification process. And also I would just note that all of that review and verification is built into our pricing model. So there's no additional cost or charge for a document verification or on-site visit. Once the company receives its rating report, they have an opportunity to add additional information through a management letter that might help explain to a prospective investor about, explain their current impact rating, other things they're doing that they might feel the rating didn't capture adequately, or things that they intend to do in the future. So with that as kind of an overview of the process, I want to just pull up and talk quickly about the company rating report itself. So that information that was collected in the assessment and all of the questions and metrics that were provided that roll up to 200 points are then synthesized on a rating report. This sample company that we're looking at is a 5-star rated company at the overall level. They earned 155 points. I mentioned that the threshold for qualifying to be a 5-star rated company at the overall level is about 120 points. And what you can see here, and I'm going to make this a little bit larger, but you can then see at each of the impact area levels how many points need to be earned in order to qualify as a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-star rated company within each of the 4 impact areas. That star rating guide is included on every single rating report to help investors understand and interpret the overall rating score. But you can see this company, while they're a 5-star rated company overall, they're a 2-star rated company in the environment section. And so, as an investor or as an entrepreneur, this tells me that, wow, this company has tremendous community-focused impact. And they're probably just not as focused on their environmental impact. And so if I am an investor who is looking for companies that are focused on community, that might be invested in their supply chain or, heavily invested in providing a socially focused product or service, this is a company that would be aligned with my investment objectives. And then I'm going to just zoom out a little bit more and just show you some of the other information that's available on the company rating report. And I'm happy to circulate this after the call as well if you'd like to see another sample. On the second page of the report, it then digs into, in more detail, how the company performed at each of the different impact areas, including which of the, what we call SEM, or the socially and environmentally focused business models, the company earned points for. Those SEMs are highlighted in red in each section. And then we show how the company has performed relative to its peer groups by quintile. So which of the 5 quintiles they performed in at an overall level. And you can kind of see how that information filters down here. In the next few weeks, we will begin issuing a benchmarking page with graphics on each company rating report to provide even more detailed contextual information about how a company has performed relative to its peers in the same geography, in the same sector, and of companies with comparable size. The third page on the current rating report looks at that disclosure questionnaire. This is not part of the overall rating, but it's merely intended to help inform prospective investors of any sensitive sectors or activities. And if a company were to answer any of these in the affirmative, they could provide additional explanation in this text box below. And then beyond that, we provide management contact details, and this is where if a company provided a management letter to further explain their social impact, this is where they could add that. The final page just includes kind of a standard set of language around the GIIRS rating process. I'm going to move back over now to my slides, and just to kind of recap the benefit to having gone through this rating process. Again, the primary benefit is that if you are looking to raise capital, getting GIIRS rated and being kind of part of this group of social enterprises and sustainable businesses that are focused on impact performance helps differentiate you from kind of other businesses in the market. And I'm going to talk a little bit in more detail about some of the additional capital raising tools and resources that we have in just one moment. Additional benefits including that performance tracking, so you can see how your impact performance improves over time, especially if you've taken advantage of those best practice guides, as well as industry benchmarking, and that's again the peer group benchmarking data that we're adding into the company rating reports. Improve technical or utilizing the technical assistance tools that we have built, and then also having streamlined reporting. So a number of the companies that are currently GIIRS rated are not only using their rating report to attract new investors, but are also using them to report out and comply with the reporting requirements of their current investors. And then lastly, additional exposure to prospective investors through the GIIRS Analytics platform, which I'll talk about, and recognition of your company as the leadership in the impact investing space and being one of the first few hundred companies to receive a GIIRS rating. The next thing I just want to focus on briefly is, so who else is using GIIRS? As of today, we have 58 funds that are using GIIRS to evaluate their fund level social impact and environmental impact, as well as their company level impacts. These 58 funds have close to 400 portfolio companies, about 225 of which have completed the ratings process. The others are kind of funds that have more recently signed up to use GIIRS and who are going through the rating process currently. And then who else is using GIIRS? We have 20 what we call pioneer investors. These are investors who have made a public declaration that they have an investment preference for companies that are GIIRS rated and for funds that are GIIRS rated. These investors represent everything or everyone from foundations to different family offices and high net worth individual investors to global financial institutions like JP Morgan and Prudential, to fund of funds like Serona Asset Management, to development finance institutions like the Inter-American Development Bank. Two of the pioneer investors I just want to highlight in particular who focus on investing solely in Africa are the Tony Elumelu Foundation based in Nigeria and the Ghana Venture Capital Trust Fund, which is our newest pioneer investor. So all of these investors have some portion of their portfolio that's allocated towards impact investing and are asking their current portfolio investments to use GIIRS for their standard reporting, and then are requiring of their new investments that they will use GIIRS to report on their impact over the lifetime of the investment. How those pioneer investors and other investors in the impact investing space are using GIIRS is through our analytics product. GIIRS Analytics is currently in a demo phase, and we will be launching this product publicly at the end of the year. But I want to give you a brief early demo of the analytics platform and let you understand kind of what its intent is. The analogy we use is that it's like a capital IQ, but for impact data. It's a place where investors and fund managers can manage their impact portfolios, do analysis of their portfolio data, conduct benchmarking against the universe of rated GIIRS companies and funds, and also identify mission-aligned social enterprises and sustainable businesses. So, there are a variety of users, from fund managers to investment advisors to other kind of wealth managers. And now I'm going to kind of pull up a preview of the analytics platform. But before I do that, I actually want to show you kind of the first step in any rated company or fund in terms of how we're helping to promote them is just from our, again, we're at our GIIRS website homepage. Under the For Investors tab, you can click on the company directory or the fund directory to view all of the companies or funds that have gone through this rigorous process of getting a GIIRS rating. From the company directory page, you can find out a little bit of basic information about the company, see their logo, understand what they do, what sector they're involved in, where they're based. But importantly, this is on our public website, and we do not disclose a company or a fund's rating on this tab. You can see we provide the rating date for each company, and if you wanted to learn a little bit more, for example, about Acilia, you could view the company profile, and again, it'll give you kind of that additional information about their description, their mission, where they're based, what industry they're in. So this is kind of the first step in disclosure of who has gone through the ratings process. To get more detailed information, an investor must be a subscriber to the GIIRS Analytics platform. How to access the analytics platform, what we're looking at right now, I know this looks a lot like the company portal that we were looking at earlier. This is actually our investor portal. And from the investor portal, each GIIRS Analytics subscriber will have an analytics tab. The first thing I want to show you is the search functionality. So if you are looking to raise capital, your company would be, having gone through a GIIRS rating process, would be listed here. And an investor might say, you know, I'm looking to invest in any companies that are based in, let's say, actually let's do an advanced search because I want to actually search based on region. So I might say I want to invest in any company that is based in sub-Saharan Africa and that has a particular focus on impact through their community impacts. And I only want to focus on really the 4- and 5-star rated companies within community, so I'm going to select that. And that's going to screen all of the companies that have been rated and then show you that search results. We've got 8 companies that fit those parameters. Here you can see the company name, what market, either emerging, frontier, or developed, that they're based in, what industry specifically they focus on, and what their score on their GIIRS rating was. You can then actually click through and learn more about the company and also see some basic benchmarking information. You can also learn if they are actively raising capital. And I should mention that of the 222 companies that have been rated to date, about 40% of those companies are looking to raise capital from mission-aligned investors. The last thing I want to show you before we go to questions is just a little more information about the universe of companies that have gone through this process to date and some of the other functionality that we've built into our GIIRS Analytics platform. I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller so we can see this. But from our marketplace page, you can see who's rated in terms of the market segmentation, in terms of geographic segmentation, as well as sectoral segmentation. So if I say I want to see all of the companies that have been rated in sub-Saharan Africa, I click on that piece of the pie, and it's going to open up a report that shows me who's been rated by country. And then I might say, well, let's look at South Africa. What specific companies have been rated in South Africa? And so it's going to just take one moment to load here. But when I click on South Africa, it's going to give me the name of each of those companies. And then I can even click through and see the overall score of the company, not its full rating report, not its underlying assessment data, but I can see their overall score. I can see some benchmark information relative to their other peer groups, in a real top performer. You can see this company opted not to disclose whether it's raising information or what it's, raising capital or what its revenue information is. But down here you can get further information about how they've performed relative to their peer groups. They're really quite an exceptional company. Move here too. Other companies in the same industry and market are getting about 108 or even an 85 as an average score. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up, again, you can use your GIIRS rating to raise capital. You can differentiate your company as an impact investment by listing on the Nexii platform. By becoming a GIIRS rated company, you would be included in that public GIIRS directory, as well as the subscription-driven GIIRS Analytics platform. For those entrepreneurs that are interested in connecting with any of our GIIRS rated funds or our pioneer investors, we can help facilitate those introductions. We also lastly include all of the companies that have been rated in our GIIRS Marketplace emails, which we send periodically to all of the subscribers to our GIIRS emails, which reach about 8,000 users. And so at that point, I'm going to pause, and I'm happy to take any questions, and I thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Flory, very much for that. We are going to cover some of the questions that have been sent through, so thank you for everyone who has typed in, and for any of you still left there, I do encourage you to join the discussion and submit questions on the right-hand side of your screen. Flory, I'm going to start with a question. If you could help to explain the difference between GIIRS as a rating system and, say, an impact investment reporting framework like SROI.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And so, GIIRS, again, looks at kind of 5 different broad impact categories. And our methodology is very much driven off of kind of individual question-level results and metric-level results, and then aggregated up to that overall score. It's different from the SROI methodology. And let me just also say at the outset, I am not an expert in the SROI methodology. But my understanding is, I think that usually the SROI methodology focuses on probably a smaller number of different kind of impacts and outcomes of an investment, and then using kind of some of the data that's provided, and then kind of making assumptions on, for example, if a company spends $100,000 on its wages to employees on an annual basis, there might be an assumption that 50% of that wage benefit is accrued to the company and 50% of the wage benefit is accrued to the worker. It then, using those assumptions, kind of filters through into an actual, dollar amount of positive outcome from that original investment. GIIRS does not kind of result in a dollar value of investment. We rather are saying, and importantly, kind of separating financial performance from social performance. We're saying, here's what the social outcome of that investment is. So, that's kind of, I think, one crucial distinction between GIIRS and SROI. And then, just to kind of talk more broadly about some of the other methodologies that exist in the market, I'd say what makes GIIRS unique from other ratings, for example, is that we do provide ratings that are kind of cross-sector and cross-geography that then allow for comparability across those different variables. And it seems like many of the other methodologies that exist in the market today might focus on one specific sector or one specific industry. So what we're really trying to do is provide that level of comparability through our methodology.
Great, thank you for that clarification. In keeping of how GIIRS works, we have a question here around, does the assessment system that GIIRS uses include a logic or consistency test that's visible either to the person completing the GIIRS assessment or to the GIIRS team?
Yeah, so a lot of the questions kind of build off of previous questions. So, we kind of start with, some of the more basic questions, and then we kind of build from there. So to give an example of that, in the worker section, the first question we ask is, are all of your workers paid, above a minimum wage? And just as a footnote, we are really eager to use fair wage data, and unfortunately there is not sufficient fair wage data available for a broad enough number of countries, and so we have to kind of default to minimum wage data. But at any rate, our first question says, are all workers paid above the minimum wage? And then we dig a little deeper from there, and we say, well, what percent above minimum wage is the lowest paid worker, and then kind of on an annual basis, what percent beyond inflation are worker wages increased. So we kind of build from a first step to get to kind of more sophisticated impacts and practices that a company might be engaged in. So we hope that kind of logic is apparent to the entrepreneur as they're going through the assessment. One improvement that we intend to make to the assessment in the future is to, kind of from that logic model perspective, if someone were to answer in the negative to the initial question, we would then remove those subsequent questions from the assessment to help kind of streamline the reporting process for companies. So if they're not doing something, they don't, for example, if they don't have a board of directors, they don't need to answer the next two questions that ask what the responsibilities of the board is and what the board composition is.
Great. We have another question here. How does GIIRS define impact, if there's a specific definition? And is it necessary for the entrepreneurs and enterprises that use the GIIRS assessment to continue to come back to do the assessment over time, to measure its impact over time, and to measure if it has mission drift, let's say? So how does the GIIRS rating system provide mission assurance for both enterprises and investors?
Yep. Great questions. I'm going to answer the second part first, which is that companies go through the ratings process and update their assessment on an annual basis. So we're able to track and performance over time, by looking at that data and how performance has changed on an annual basis. With regard to kind of the mission creep question, that's very much where focusing on, the socially and environmentally focused business model section, or kind of the core business model, where we can begin to see, if a company previously had generated all of its revenues through the provision of, electricity to underserved communities, and then may be moving into, more of a middle-income market demographic, we're going to see as that beneficiary or customer group shifts over time, we would see their performance in that section decline, and they would earn less points there. And from an investor perspective, then the investor would also kind of see that trend and shift in the company's performance. The investor would be able to see the underlying data that the company has provided to even, to kind of understand specifically what's going on at the business level, to identify where there might be some shift in the mission of the business. The first part of the question, how do we define impact? Our role in this market is to provide transparency and data collection on positive impact performance. So we, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we provide a buffet of different kind of positive impacts, positive practices, positive behaviors, positive business models that a company can be involved in. We don't have a minimum threshold or a minimum score that a company needs to meet in order to earn a GIIRS rating. So we recognize by providing a rating, no matter how low or how high that rating is, we provide recognition of a company's interest in being a social enterprise or a sustainable business by having gone through this process. So we're not trying to define impact for the market. We're just trying to collect data and provide transparency around impact performance to then allow investors to determine what meets their own impact objective from a social performance perspective. Rather, again, we're asking for all of the data that the market and different experts on our standards body have identified as being attributed to a positive impact performance.
Great. Thank you so much, Flory. In the interest of time, we have hit the hour. So if we didn't get to your questions today, you may send them to Flory or you may send them to Nexii. We have tracked all of the questions during the webinar, so we will be sending them through to Flory. Back to you with some thoughts on them. I would like to thank you, Flory, again for your presentation, and to thank you all for your participation. And we very much look forward to having you on future Nexii webinars. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, for your time. Have a great afternoon.